You cannot forecast what's going to happen in the future if you do not talk with the business, because if you do that, you will become the sort of enemy because you do their job in their place. So we work with human people, we work with human beings, and there are egos, there are sensibilities, and you will want to involve them to understand how they understand their future, and you will translate it back. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to stay objective and get their information, put it in a model. That doesn't work. You also have your knowledge.
Hello and welcome. Real quick update today for you. Before we start the episode, I have got something special for all my FP&A professionals out there. If you have ever wondered whether your current FP&A practices and your FP&A department is truly best in class, or you are looking to find out where you are actually falling short, I have created a free FP&A assessment just for you based on my 20 years of experience. It is a quick but powerful diagnostic tool which helps you assess your data, processes, people, and technology, and provides a quick snapshot on your strengths, uncovers your hidden gaps, and gives you a clear roadmap on becoming a more strategic, data-driven finance leader. It takes less than 5 minutes to assess where you stand. The link is in the description below. Thank you. Hello and welcome to FP&A Unboxed, where we dive into real stories and challenges and wins for finance leaders. I am Tejas Parekh, the founder of Aksha Business Consulting and your host on the FP&A Unboxed podcast today. Today with us, we have a guest who is really special, who has reasonable LinkedIn following, and I think most people don't need an introduction. We have today Soufyan Hamid, global expert in storytelling and finance business partnering with over 17 years of experience, including time at Big Four and as finance business partner. Soufyan now helps FP&A teams around the world improve how they present and communicate insights. He is the founder of the Finance Circle and the creator of a financial storytelling program, a training followed by more than 400 finance professionals globally. You might also know him from LinkedIn, where nearly 82,000 people follow him for his work on storytelling and finance. Sofian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, yes.
I mean, it is really a pleasure. I mean, we've spoken offline a few times, I think, but it is really good to have you on here because I think some of the stories that you tell on LinkedIn, I think finance people, we all become chartered and we think that we know what we are talking about. Reality is we don't know. We know what we are talking about. We don't know how to communicate it. So we know our numbers, but once we know our numbers and explaining that to somebody who is non-financial is a whole different element, I think. Any thoughts?
Well, indeed, that's right. And the thing is that we know, like you say, we know what we're talking about. We know what's behind. The only thing is that in terms of communication, that's not the same job. When we work in finance, the goal is first to ensure that our numbers are correct, accurate, complete, everything that you thought in audits. But when you have to communicate about it, it's not really giving everything that you've seen, giving everything that you observed. It's just wondering, and that requires some human skills that are not directly in our skill set. That requires to understand what's interesting for the people in front of us. And that's what communication is about, because when you communicate, you will want your thoughts to be useful. But they're only useful for some people, some others not, and in a way that's different from one to the other. So communication is not really speaking, it's putting yourself in the mind of others.
Exactly, right? I mean, and again, I think I read this book, right, which was about decision making and things like that. And they also said the same thing, that when you are communicating your ideas, it's not about helping the person walk the same journey. You went through some wild paths and you got lost and everything else, and that's fine in your data. But when you're communicating, it has to be very succinct and relevant to the individual. Telling the operations director about sales performance or marketing performance is irrelevant conversation. Though it might be important and useful, it's not relevant. So again, it needs to be relevant as well. So you recently shared a powerful list of mindset shifts, like show up with scenarios before they are needed, design the question you're trying to answer, and things like that. Do a whole lot of brainstorming before you go to a presentation. Which one of these shifts you find most critical that finance leaders today need, and why?
Well, indeed, that's very important to shift the mindset. Just like I said before, communication is not really the way of speaking. It's really thinking first about what's needed for the others. And I think it's the mindset that's needed for us, the mindset shift that's needed for us in FP&A. We all have a background in finance, accounting, audit for others, consulting for others. The thing is that we have to really think, okay, how is this helping others? Because we have to understand that finance is not a goal as such. It's a tool. It's a tool that needs to be used for decision making. And in this decision process that we have to understand, how is this helping the others to make the decision? And so the shift is to put yourself in the client's shoes, you see? And you have a consulting background as well. I have too. So even for me, it was not easy to get it. Imagine people who started directly in controlling, in FP&A, or simply started in accounting. They were not trained to have this customer relationship background. And so I think this is the mindset shift that's mostly needed for FP&A, is to think about the other as a client, as a customer, and you have to understand how is your product helping them.
No, exactly. Like, and again, yes, I am doing consulting now, but I do come from industry, so I know exactly what you're saying. I used to have this bad habit. I used to go and tell my managers the whole story. I got the data from here, then I did this, then I did that, and this it used to not work. But then at GE Healthcare, I had this boss. He made it really difficult. He was like, "Tejas, you have 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, either I have asked you a question more to understand more about what you are talking, or stop talking and get out, basically." So he used to literally give me 30 seconds for a pitch. So if I want him to get interested or hooked into something, I have to pitch it in 30 seconds. And I think that was very, very helpful, because then it made my communication style completely change. I'd go in and tuck, 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 three things: interested, not interested, not interested, I get out, interested, let's talk more. Literally change the whole communication style, right? I mean, instead of telling him the story of I did this and I did, he's like, I don't care what you did. Tell me what I need to do. That's the conversation, right?
But that's the most important. When what I realized in these 4 years I've given my training is that, and this is why my approach of storytelling is a bit different from what I see in others. It's not really telling people. Yes, I do tell people how to communicate, but the biggest weakness I see is that people have a hard time filtering what to say and what not to say. It's very difficult for them to, it's called curse of knowledge. You know something, and it's hard to imagine that the people won't know the same thing. You want them to know, and you want them to understand the same way you understood. Let's remember, our work is meant for something else. It's not the goal as such that our financials are good, are accurate, and are complete. Yes, it's part of the job. It's part of the accounting job. And we in FP&A, we in finance have to ensure that this is done. But the goal for internal purpose is different. Making sure that it's correct, it's for the state, it's for the auditors. And when your numbers are correct, the investors are happy because they can count on it. But they will not make investment decisions based on how correct and accurate your number is. They will just make decisions based on the performance of your revenues, the performance of your margin. If you decrease the costs, they will be happy. If your costs have increased, they won't be happy. So whatever you do, it's not really the fact that you made sure your accounts are correct. It's what's behind the business performance that happened behind. That's very important for them. And if you get it as a finance business partners, as an FP&A practitioner, you will make sure that you will participate to this decision-making process.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, if you provide unnecessary information, then you're not going to be invited to the big boys table. You're only invited to the big boys table when you speak relevant information. So essentially, that is important. So how can somebody who is practicing FP&A today, right, and they are not, they or their business is not sponsoring your course or things like that. So without any training or tools, how does one somebody start today to making that mindset shift away from, going into too much depth and talking relevant and things like that? So what is that one mindset shift you can do independently without training?
I wouldn't say there is one mindset shift. The only thing is that you have to be curious. You have to be curious about what's running the company, what's driving revenues, what's driving the costs, how does this work, what are the operational drivers behind the movements in your financials. And so a good way to do that, but it's 101 of FP&A. When you start working in FP&A, is to start and ghost your business partners 1 day, 1 week, 1 day per month, anytime. You ghost them, and when I say ghost, it's more shadow them. Like you go in a meeting with them. If you work in a factory, you go in the factory. If you work in a production environment, in a manufacturing, you go there. The only thing is that you have to understand how the flows there translate into your financial flows, because your role will be to make that translation back again to the reality. Let's not forget accounting is just the translation of what happened outside normal world. And if you translate it to accounting because you have an invoice, because you have an accrual or something like that, well, for the others, when you start communicating, you will translate it back to their reality.
And that is what it is, right? So I always say that finance is almost a follow up act after the business decision or the business activity is done. And therefore, being a part of understanding that business activity is a lot more important, because finance is just a follow up act. You are just booking what is done already. The FP&A magic comes when you influence what actions are being driven in the business.
It's generally what we say, that accounting is about the past and finance, FP&A, is about the present and the future. Let's say it's not that black and white. Accounting people can also think about the future because they will have to understand the risks and eventually book accruals for the risks and the rest. So I like this image because it's simple, but I don't want to just cast accounting people to the past and finance people to the future. But the goal of finance in general is indeed this one: the fact that based on your observations from the past, you try to understand how it's going to happen in the future, and you help people understand how it's going to happen in the future. So it's not that you are the one with the holding all the keys. Of course, you will do that in partnering with the business people. And I was that in the past, and I understood quickly that it could not work. You cannot forecast what's going to happen in the future if you do not talk with the business, because if you do that, you will become a sort of enemy because you do their job in their place. So we work with human people, we work with human beings, and there are egos, there are sensibilities, and you will want to involve them to understand how they understand their future, and you will translate it back. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to stay objective and get their information, put it in a model. That doesn't work. You also have your knowledge. You also know how to, and I don't like this word, but I haven't found another one, to challenge the business partners. Because when you work with them, you have to understand that they have their goals. And so if they have to budget commercial performances, in many occasions, I've seen sandbagging. I've seen people understanding how they could perform next year and just add a risk and another risk and so on, so that their year would be easier. And in the past, in the beginning of my FP&A years, I just took it and eventually saw in the end of the year that they did like 300% of their targets. And it's easily understood because I wouldn't do otherwise. If I had to decide on my own targets, I would never choose for something that's too difficult to reach.
And again, because my bonus depends on that, right? I mean, let's be very blunt and honest, right? Because my bonus and my commission depends on that. So I'll try and put every risk possible in it and put all opportunities out so that I can get my bonus. And I mean, that way I like the sales beast. I always say I like the sales and marketing beast because the motivation is very simple. As long as the carrot makes sense, they will run and get it. It's not very complicated. It is therefore for us as finance to learn and appreciate it and then make sure the carrot is in the right box for them to be able to.
The costs are also an interesting beast because, you really have the feeling when you work on an expense budget that you really take away something from the people. Like you really take something from their wallet. While when we talk about cost savings, it's not something real. I mean, it did not happen yet. But because they've had that in the past, they really want to get the same or more in the future. And as soon as you speak of cost savings, although you're capable of showing that you are going to do exactly the same performance with less costs, it really affects the stakeholders.
Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to hear about it. When you talk cost savings, you are the public enemy number one.
Yeah, sure. On everything, even on paper, I had once a project of cost savings, and one pillar was to go on electronic invoices. It was in 2020, so it's not like it was 20 years ago. And even that was somehow really sensitive, and people were starting to be really nervous about it because you really started to think, okay, we are going to touch their wallet, we are going to touch their money. It was not existing money, it was money spent on paper, and we wanted to move away from paper to electronic invoices. It was just that, in our observations, we saw that like half of our customers already had electronic invoices. We just needed to say, okay, you are going to get only electronic invoices and not paper invoices anymore. It was already half of the costs that were going to disappear. But even that was hard to understand and hard to imagine for them because they were starting to say, yeah, but our clients won't like it because we will send a communication to tell them they won't get their paper invoice. Some people like both.
Yeah, no, but the thing is this, right? I think it is not to do with what you are doing. It's a story of change management. People don't like change. When you try to communicate change, it's a challenging environment for them to, digest that. Anyway, so you emphasize on storytelling that isn't just for FP&A, right? You talk about storytelling is for tax, for treasury, for every team within the finance function. So how do you coach people depending on their audience for whether they're auditor or a board member or things like that? So how do you really coach to tailor their message essentially?
To be transparent, I mainly coach FP&A people. The only thing is that, of course, when I work with companies, the CFO won't say, okay, this training is only for FP&A. I have accounting people, I have tax people. And so the goal is a bit the same as in FP&A, to tell them that the goal of their work is not what they do, is what we do with their work. And in that, the main point that's important for them is, of course, how to communicate, how to structure a presentation, but also to make sure that they have the main tool that I use for storytelling, the 3 what. It's simply, okay, you've done something, this is the what. But then you have to make sure that it's important for the people and that it has a value. It's the so what, and to guide people of what's going to happen with this. What are we going to do? The now what. And in this, that requires them to understand what is the audience expecting from that moment. What's the audience expecting from that communication, an email, for example, a presentation, a report. Because when you include the so what and now what, it's easier for them to make sense of your communication self. And it doesn't really matter if you're in accounting, in tax, in M&A, FP&A, and so on. If you have these three, you're already like 50 or 60% better in storytelling, because you understand that your communication is not only giving information, it's giving an insight. Why is it important for them? And what do we do with that?
You just spoke about essentially, that storytelling is for everybody, and it even our treasury or audit people need to be able to tell better stories. So now, do you have a real world example where you've been able to leverage this storytelling framework, where one of your trainees has used this framework to deliver a difficult message, or get a strategic approval or a budgetary approval or something which is a bit tricky to manage, where this framework and this storytelling approach has helped people?
I've had a client recently who had to present a budget. And the thing is that it was for a business unit that was generally performing well. The thing is that they were seeing a lot of risk. It was I won't say too much about them, but it was B2B industry. So it's not like it was a recurring revenue. I mean, you had a lot of activations, not a lot of churn. The only thing is that there was a lot of risks on the next year because of a huge contract that was 90% lost, let's say, because they saw in the RFP that client was clearly looking for something else, and that the RFP was clearly influenced by someone else. So in their head, this was lost. The thing is that selling a budget without by saying that you are going to lose the biggest customer, it's not really sexy in most cases. And so here, in that sense, I told them to use my storytelling framework using the 3 what first, by saying what's the risk? How did we determine that this risk is existing? What's the impact on a total year basis? And what are we going to do with that? And the budget was accepted. Of course, there are other parts of the framework because they use the pyramid structure, they used better visuals, a better structure of the deck itself. But including the 3 what, understanding what's the risk on a year basis, because they only had like 8 months actuals. And for them, it was great because the client was still there. But by using the so what's the impact? Well, how did we determine that the risk was real, and what's the impact, and what are we going to do with that? It was more easily accepted because they already had plans to contract new customers that were, I wouldn't say the same value as the last one, but at least they had plans to compensate, to mitigate that risk. And when you talk to executives, if you only talk about risks without showing them a bit of light in the end of the tunnel, they won't like it. But in this case, they didn't like it neither, but they were ready to accept that risk because it was well documented, well presented. They felt the same risk as the commercial department. And so they understood that, okay, this is a risk we are going to accept because there are already mitigating actions for the next year.
Yeah, I mean, that is critical, right? I mean, you're not saying, okay, now we have lost a customer, we are sitting here, we don't know what to do next. That never sounds good, right? When you say, I've got, okay, these are things in pipeline for us to cover this risk, then it starts to make a lot more sense that you are prepared for what is happening in your business, and you sound a lot more in control, which is, I think, important. So you post on transitioning from an auditor to FP&A listed habits, like preparing for a meeting before the slides, offering options, not just a number. Which habit tends to be the hardest to adopt, and why?
I wouldn't say, we wouldn't talk about what habit is the best, because if I shared 5, I mean, they are all important, but the mindset shift is more to understand. And it's a bit what we've talked about since the beginning, when we move from auditing to FP&A, when you work in auditing, your goal is to show that the numbers are correct. So it's your role, it's your job. While when you work in FP&A, it's only a tool. It's what you do to understand how you can use these figures to help decision making, to help forecasting, to help planning a new product. So these numbers are only a tool. And this is the mindset shift that you need to understand. Your mission is not finished when the closing is done. While when you go in audit, you work when the closing is half done, you work on the numbers, and you close them with your opinion, with your audit opinion after the partner have talked to the CFO and agreed on the adjustments to do or not to do. Your job is done, it's signed, the annual accounts are sent, the investor accounts are sent, and that's your job. While when the accounts are ready, your job starts in FP&A. And that, I think it's the biggest mindset shift that you have to understand when you move from auditing to FP&A.
Cool. So how do these habits help elevating FP&A from a reporting function to a strategic influence, essentially?
When you think about your job not only as an accounting job, but when you think about your job as something that's used for the rest of the company, you already are in a strategic job. You see, when you are going to use the P&L, for example, and you've seen everything, the moment you start already updating the forecast, the moment you start already to present with the 3 what, you see, when you go and say, okay, this is what I've observed, this comes from this means this until the end of the year, and according to your target, you will start to feel stressed or not. And then you say you manage to calculate and quantify options. You are already in a strategic mindset, especially when you try to go beyond the financial year, because that's something I've observed as well. When you work in FP&A, many people just consider the year's budget, and they see like a wall at the end of December or whatever date is used for your company. They see a wall at the end of December, but when you try to understand how it's going further next year and the next years, and so you refer back to your 3 or 5 year plan, in that case, you are more strategic.
Cool. So how you point out that strong analysis is the foundation of storytelling. Even today you talked about, strong analysis and getting the numbers correct is the starting point. It's not the end point, but it is the starting point of a conversation. So how can teams ensure that they do not shortcut this step, especially under pressure, to produce fast insights?
You see, that's something that I've observed. It's really hard to make FP&A people work on sizing. You see, that's what's important. When you're closing annual accounts, investor decks, and so on, the data has to be perfect. But to make a decision, I mean, it's never perfect because it did not happen. It's not correct. So as long as your past data is okay, I wouldn't say complete, but is okay, and you can size what the opportunity is. For example, before starting a business case, I've seen that most of my career, people start building a whole financial model, a whole business case for something upfront that's not going to take off. Like, for example, the market is too small. I've worked on a business case, I remember, when it was a great innovation. But I mean, it was an innovation that in Belgium didn't make sense because most of the clients were international companies, and these international companies had somehow contracts on international level. And in Belgium, I mean, we can do whatever we want. We are a small country. We cannot do a lot on this part. It was good to try, but based on simple sizing, you could see that the opportunity was too small and was not worth the investment because it required a lot of investment. internally for production, for development. It was requiring a lot of, and so what I ask when I see people working on a business case is first, before touching Excel, just to take a paper and calculator and see, okay, what's my market size? What's my market share on the approach? What's the number of people I could reach? And just ask quickly to the IT department or anything, okay, can you just ballpen me the cost? And you just make a simple comparison. You do not have to go on what's the NPV, what's the payback period for the, no, just, okay, total cost, total possible revenues, does that match? And you will see that you will work on much less business cases because you are able to do not provide a perfect model. It's a simple calculation that you do on a piece of paper, but this already helps determining whether we can go for it or not. And when you are in a meeting, for example, like a strategic meeting for a 3-year plan, 5-year plan, management will sometimes ask a simple question. Okay, we have a churn of 10%. What if it's 11%? Okay, it's not going to be perfect, but you can do, okay, 1% of churn is this. So on the year basis, oh, it's more or less 10 million euros lost. If it's 9, if it's 11, nobody's going to care. You gave a simple sizing. Do not say, okay, I'm going to take that question and come back to you in 2 weeks.
That is it. That I think is critical, right? A lot of finance people tend to say, oh, we'll come back to you. And then they come back to you in 2 or 3 days. The person has forgotten the question. The commercial relevance is lost by the time you've got there. So sometimes taking that 80-20 and going with a bit of a gut feel is not a bad idea to go with, essentially.
You said an important word, gut feeling. Let's remember that whatever we do, in whatever data organization we are, people still make decisions with guts. They still make decisions based on how good they feel. And this is why storytelling is important, because if you just give the numbers, even if you did a great analysis, showing how numbers are not okay for a simple decision or a simple project, if you do not sell it, people are still going to remain on their feeling. Okay, I have a feeling this is a good opportunity in the market. But if you use storytelling and you know the frameworks and the 3 what and so on, they're going to say, okay, I'm not feeling it anymore. Because it's a matter of feeling it as well, not just information and numbers.
Exactly. And you need to make them feel that positivity or that challenge so that they can then connect with it in an emotional manner. Emotion drive actions. I don't think numbers drive actions at the end of the day, right? So you've built Finance Circle and trained thousands and spoken globally on finance communication. What stands out as a transformation story for one of your cohorts, right? Where somebody's moved from a back office to really being invited to strategic conversations because they have started following your framework.
Well, yes, one of my first clients was a major company in Algeria. You know, it's something that I do when I give my trainings about storytelling and finance business partnering is that I always offer a checkup session 6 months after. So, for example, I give my training and then 6 months after, I have a call with the whole team. And in this case, it was a 2 days training, so it was the Rolls Royce of my trainings. And in this case, not only the CFO said that they've seen or observed a clear difference in the presentations that were prepared and given by their teams, but also, and that was the best feeling that I've had, like third of the team was changed their job inside the company. When I gave the training, they had only one strategic finance business partner. When I came back 6 months after, there were 3. Some people moved from accounting to FP&A. Some people moved from tax to FP&A. And so most of them already inserted the changes in their daily jobs that had an impact on their internal career. And the CFO was satisfied because, of course, he was trying to make sure that his team was mostly working on making finance useful and not making finance simply the way it was at that moment.
So, with the rising adoption of AI and self-service BI tools, how do you see FP&A leaders preserving both credibility and influence?
But that's the opportunity to get it, actually, well, with AI, I've discussed with many leaders and I've had different surveys with my followers. When I ask, why don't people invest more time in preparing, delivering their presentations, in investing in business partnering activities, they mostly tell me, oh, it's because of the time, because we don't have the time. And the thing is that those tools are going to ensure we have the time to do so. And that's our opportunity to be even more relevant than today. Of course, I'm not going to be utopic. All these AI tools, all these self-servicing tools will certainly erase some jobs. This is what's going to happen. And today we all say, yeah, AI is not going to replace your job. People with AI will going to take your jobs. But let's be honest. I mean, the companies are looking for cost savings. If they are going to see that AI is going to do some tasks, some people with the right skills will be able to be relevant and elevate. But those who don't, well, they won't get other opportunities inside the company. So either they will be trained for other tools or skills, or they will simply disappear. But our way to remain in the ones that are going to keep a job inside of FP&A and finance in general is to work on these human skills, because this is the main differentiator with AI, with automation tools, with dashboarding, and with the self-servicing. And to be honest, self-servicing has existed for years. It hasn't changed much. I mean, you've probably seen that in Power BI and all those things. People ask for a dashboard, they will still going to ask whether you can extract it to Excel, whether you as finance business partner can analyze and give them the insights. I mean, self-servicing is a good myth, in my opinion. It exists. People can observe, but they will still ask you questions about that. They will still ask you to explain. And so your role of storyteller will be even more important. The report will be done, but your role will be even more important, because you will not be able to hide behind an Excel file preparing the report and say, when it's 2/3 of the month, okay, the report is ready, here it is. No, the report will be ready in 2 to 3 days. And there you will be able to investigate what's the reason behind. How can we change that? How can we quantify the risk? And then come back with that communication. This is the moment where we do not have excuses anymore to not do that anymore.
Yeah, no, that is the way I look at it as well. The BI tools and self-service and all of that is all good. Now, exactly where you started the story of, you can't hide, I have no time to do business partnering or no time for storytelling. You have time because all your manual labor is taken care of. So now you have all the time to actually use the framework you just provided our listeners, the three whys, and basically use that to actually do what needs to be done, right? So if you could leave our listeners with one question to ask themselves as finance professionals, one that will signal whether they are ready to lead or just report, what would that question be?
The question that I will ask people to ask themselves is, are you ready to work on the question rather than on the answer? Because working on the answer is being at the end of the train. When you work on the question, you are in the train and even in the steering part of the train. So with all that's happening now, and speaking of the human skills, designing the question is, for me, one of the biggest learnings that you have to do today. When you use your tools, finance, financial modeling, and everything, it's with a goal in mind. If you just react on the goals, if you just react on the questions, you are at a certain moment going to disappear with prompting and so on. But if you are one of the few that are able to say, okay, this is the risk that I see, what are we going to solve? What are we going to decide? What are we going to do with this? You're one of the few that are going to stay relevant in the coming years.
So are you prepared to ask the question, or are you prepared to provide only answers?
Yeah.
If you're providing answers, you are reporting. But if you're providing the right question, then you are influencing.
Exactly.
Perfect. Cool. So I have 3 standard questions for all guests, right? Where do you think is the future of FP&A in 3 to 5 years?
I think the future of FP&A is going to be more and more about designing scenarios and thinking about things that we don't see in with AI. Because let's be honest, AI tools are going so fast, and it's surprising how good they are. So a lot of things that we do today, even planning, forecasting, and so on, will be more and more taken by AI tools, Gen AI tools. But if you are able to be the one who is going to think about the scenarios, the risks, and put the pieces together, then you are going to be in FP&A. And so that means that we'll see more and more finance people moving to FP&A, because let's remember, many companies don't have an FP&A department. They have an accounting department, they have a financial controlling department, but we are going to see somehow a shift from one to the other, because a lot of activities of the firsts will be taken away. And so we'll see more and more people moving to FP&A, but in the same time, we are going to see FP&A teams shrink, I think, to be honest, because today we have a lot of FP&A teams who are very much into transactional activities, and these will disappear, in my opinion.
I agree completely. I was a part of a transformation project, and we found that at least 30% of FP&A time was being spent in actually doing accounting or controllership activity. And therefore, automatically 30% of the team disappears, because you take the task away from FP&A, then it's gone from FP&A. Essentially, you don't need such a big FP&A team. So I agree completely. What is the one thing that most FP&A functions need help with today to become better strategic finance business partners?
For me, they definitely need training to change not only their mindset, but also change their way of working. And so this is a training that must be practical, that must be based on their real activities, tailored to their industries, and also make sure that they do it. Because you know how trainings are. You have a full day, it's nice. The day after, you say, oh, it was so inspiring, but then you get a mail about data dump request, you do it, and you forget about it. So it has to be followed up. And this follow-up takes 2 forms. The first one is that it has to be sponsored inside. So when you have an FP&A director, when you have a CFO asking for this kind of training, they need to understand and make sure that there is a change inside. And the second thing is that there has to be a follow-up on the trainer side, making sure that this is not just a one-shot, this is a transformation that you sell. And this is what I do when I deliver my trainings, for example, is that I tell people I want to see that change in mindset, and 6 months after, I want to see it done. How did you manage to apply that framework that I gave you? How did you manage to change your decks? Did it go from 50 to 10 slides? Did it change from backup to the main deck, then from the main deck to the backup? Did you have more opportunities to present in front of people or not? All these things make sure that it's a sort of reminder shot that you have 6 months after. And if you haven't done that, you will do after, because you notice it's not only a 1-day thing. It's supposed to help me still be relevant in 5 years.
So for someone who is looking to move into FP&A or just starting in FP&A, what is the one skill or qualification you think they should acquire? Somebody who is starting in FP&A, right? You're just in FP&A or you're looking to transition into FP&A. One skill or certification you think they should do?
Yeah, the skill is a bit what we said already in the podcast. When you work in FP&A, it's business function with financial skills. So you have to understand the business self, and you have to shadow your business partners. You have to understand how the business flows are working and translated into finance. And maybe a way to do so is to build the financial model behind the business unit you work for, or simply the department you work for.
Cool. Perfect. So basically following business and making sure you are focused on the business more than finance is critical.
Yeah, you have to focus on both. It's just that you have to understand. It's like an athlete. If you are an athlete, let's say that you run the 100 meters. I mean, you build muscles, but your goal is not to be the most musculated one. Your goal is to run the fastest 100 meters. Your goal is to run, but for that you have to build muscles. It cannot go from one without the other. You have to do both.
Perfect. Any closing thoughts?
Well, for me, that's very important that FP&A people start to think today about what's going to happen in 5 years, not in 5 years, because today you have to understand that it's not going to be your financial skills, the differentiator. It's a competitive environment. You see that I've had a lot of contacts. It's not yet in Europe, but in the US, there are less and less opportunities to have an FP&A role. And if they request a lot of talents, not only on the technical side, but also, and that's where I want to go, on the human side. How are you going to solve problems? How are you going to negotiate with stakeholders? How are you going to communicate with your stakeholders? These are the skills that are more and more tested. And so it's simply because in 5 years, a lot of technical tasks will be taken away. And so the only thing that will be left is you yourself. And you have to start thinking today about training you yourself and not only your technical skills. That's the last thought I want your listeners to have.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Soufyan, for your time. Really, really appreciate this. I'm sure people will, think about how they communicate and how they remain relevant in a highly competitive environment as we go along. Thank you so much, Soufyan.
Yeah, thank you.